Hey YouTube, I want to make a quick video discussing the difference between gender and sexuality, because that is one thing that I don't think I've talked too much about, maybe if at all, and there's a lot of confusion around it, and that is both innocuous in nature, where it is really somebody honestly not understanding, well, if you were a man and you are now a woman, but you want to sleep with men, does that make you gay? And that is the more polite kind of, I honestly, neither, I'm not gonna, whatever, that is the more polite way of saying, why can't you just be gay? And both of those questions are just different framings, one more polite than the other, around the same question of what is really the distinction between sexuality and gender, and more specifically gender expression. And so to answer that, I think probably where most of this confusion comes from is that people are putting all this onto one kind of spectrum. So if you think about those number lines that you learned about in middle school, negative infinity at one side, positive infinity at the other, people think that trans people fit neatly onto the same spectrum, where they think that homosexuals and heterosexuals fit on, where you have your super gay people at one end, where maybe it is like a, I don't know, the ambiguously gay duo, Richard Simmons, like whoever these sort of super gay characters are. And then you're kind of on the opposite side, your super straight characters, and let's ignore the fact that they might be like homoerotic tendencies that they're ignoring, like maybe your Archers, your James Bonds, your Old Spice, Mufasa commercial guy where all you women wish your man was like me, or whatever, like these super ridiculous depictions of masculinity. And that is probably, I think, where most of the confusion comes from, where they're putting everybody on the same spectrum, when really it needs to be at least a two-dimensional chart, if not maybe even 3 dimensions. But just for the sake of explanation, I'm just going to keep it at 2 dimensions. So you still have your totally homosexual people on one end, and your totally like overly, almost like they're so straight that they might have looped around back to the totally homosexual part, where I don't know. But you basically have those two endpoints on one of your X or your Y axis. But then you also have your sexuality, your gender expression on the other axis, where totally male is maybe your positive Y values or your negative. It doesn't really matter. Like, I'm not going to say one or the other, because then people will say, oh, why is that negative or why is that positive? But it's basically using this as a descriptive kind of tool, where your totally male, macho type of characters, like your Arnold Schwarzenegger movie characters, or your Old Spice commercial character, is at one end, and then like your Barbie doll is at the complete other opposite end, and the Victoria's Secret models are closer to that complete female end, whereas your I don't know, like your American Apparel models might be somewhere closer to the middle, where they're kind of like almost androgynous. And that's the point, is that there is your sexuality spectrum and there's your gender spectrum. And it's an X and a Y axis, just like politically you can be fiscally conservative, or I don't want to spend any money, but you can be socially liberal, where it's I don't care what you're doing in your bedroom. Or you could be the opposite, where I really don't like this idea of gay people or whatever, so I want to be socially conservative, but at the same time, like, I recognize that we need to have, like, I don't know, like, liberal market policies or welfare or whatever, economic policies, so I'm fiscally liberal. And I don't think that exists too much in the real world, but, like, that is a possibility for somebody. And that is kind of the difference between gender and sexuality, and why somebody who is trans, who transitions, they might go from presenting as male to female, but they still are attracted to men, or they're still attracted to female, or maybe now, as a result of their transition, it is socially acceptable for them to express interest in men. And whereas in the past, they never really saw themselves fitting into the gay man quadrant, they always kind of saw themselves as in the straight female quadrant, which is kind of catty corner from the, or I don't know, on the opposite side of one of those axes from the other. It probably helps if I had a visual, but the point is that some of those trans people are going to end up gay because their sexual orientation isn't going to change. And I don't really think that hormones or transition changes those preferences. It really just changes your willingness to deal with society's judgment of those preferences. If that's a clear distinction for you, where it's really like, well, I've already transitioned. I've already changed my gender. Like, I've gone through this with everybody I know. So why the fuck do I care if you think I'm a homo for going out with men now that I've become a woman? Like, it's kind of bizarre. Like, it's not worth my energy to police that or fix your thinking on that. But that is basically